The On Target Institute presents a teaching from the Men on Target small group curriculum. Now with today's session, On Target founder Vince D'Acchioli.
Welcome, men. How you doing? And here we go with session 40 of the Men on Target curriculum. So happy to be with you. Another reminder to please go to otm.co and download the handouts for this session. We just finished A Man and His Money Part 1. This is going to be the conclusion of A Man and His Money, and this is going to be Part 2. And we're going to get right into this by talking about how did we get where we are in our culture when it comes to our understanding of money and our attitudes about money. And I want to share with you, as we begin, 4 economic forces that have shaped our culture. And then we're going to get into some ideas about how to have financial freedom. If you remember in our last session, we talked about the 10 things that bring about financial bondage. We're going to talk in this session about the steps toward financial freedom. Now, the 4 economic forces that all started with what we call mass production around the turn of the century. The whole idea of interchangeable parts that was introduced by Ford Motor Company. And then we had the housing boom and the electronics boom. And these things kept being mass produced, so they became more affordable. And we just had to have them. Well, the mass production was followed by what we call mass communication. The idea of being able to now promote things through movies and radio. And in 1945, around there, the TVs really started to hit the marketplace very strong. And we were no longer isolated pockets of people. We were able to be connected. And now look what's happening when you look at the internet and all of that. So mass communication then led to the idea of mass marketing. They were now able to take the goods and services that we're making and put them out into the marketplace in unbelievable ways. Ability now to create demand for products. We buy things we don't need oftentimes as a result of that. And think of some of the things we have taken for granted that were not around even 20, 30 years ago. When you look at the evolution of the cell phone and microwave ovens and all those things. So the mass marketing really brought all these things to the forefront, and we got into this idea of want. I got to have these things. So we went out and we started buying these things up as a result of mass marketing. And then that led to installment credit, because here's what happened. We spend all the money on the stuff that we really were told we needed, but we ran out of money and there's more stuff to buy. And so it's the basic motivation for work today that shifted from production to consumption. We talked a little bit about conspicuous consumption in our last session. So now in an attempt to get us to purchase more stuff, we had to come up with this installment credit idea where we could get things now and pay for it later. And that's how we've kind of evolved into the place we find ourselves today, where we're hung up with all this financial bondage and we've got more debt than we really should have. And so now I want to share with you 10 steps to financial freedom. Let's kind of dig into these things. First of all, realizing true prosperity only comes from God. True prosperity only comes from God. Deuteronomy 8:18 says this: "Remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant, which He swore to your ancestors as it is today." Realizing where real prosperity comes from is the first step toward financial freedom. Understanding that it all comes from our Lord. Number 2, rejecting false financial concepts. Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly." The counsel of the ungodly talks about financial concepts that are not necessarily good ones. And they're ones that if you follow them, oftentimes will get you even into more debt, into more financial difficulty. So rejecting false financial concepts is very, very important. Number 3, Giving tithes and offerings, another important step toward financial freedom. We talked a little bit about this in our last session as it related to bondage, but here we're talking about it as it relates to freedom. Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all of your produce. Then, that's that key word, guys. Then is a transition word. It means as a result of this, here's what happens. It's a what-if formula. Then your barns will be filled with plenty. Guys, I don't know how this works, but there's a powerful spiritual principle at work here that you cannot outgive God. Listen, with either your time or your money. You cannot outgive God. It always comes back. Number 4, keeping out of debt. What is debt? Well, the basis of debt is presumption. And we've got to be very, very careful that we do not fall into this trap. Proverbs 27:1 says, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring forth. And the way we approach life is that we just have to have all this stuff, and we're boasting about tomorrow, and we get ourselves piled up into more and more debt. And that is not healthy, especially in the world we live in today. Try, if at all possible, to get yourself free and get out of debt. A big symptom of bondage is the debt issue, and a step toward freedom is to keep yourself out of that trap. Number 5, learning to abound and to suffer need. Learning to be happy in either case. Look at Paul in Philippians 4:12. I know what it is, he said, to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I love these verses. I have learned the secret of being content. This is huge, guys. In every situation, I can be content, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. Paul understood that it didn't matter what his condition was. He learned to be satisfied. Number 6, having sales resistance. Having sales resistance is incredibly important. I mean, there are people out there trying to sell us everything, but in 1 John 2:16 it says, for all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, guys. It is from the world, and we need to understand that, and we need to have sales resistance. And it's very hard sometimes because there are people in this world that are very clever at trying to convince you that you need to have something you really don't need to have. They're artful at overcoming any objection you may have and getting you to sign the dotted line. You have to have sales resistance. Number 7, diligent and accurate planning. We talked a little bit about the importance of a strategy for living and planning when we were in our time management section, and here is where you apply it. Making sure that you're really doing some good, accurate planning, especially for your future financially. Luke 14:31 says, what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider, the idea is plan, whether he is strong enough to endure? It is very important that we do that. In some ways, I can see in my own life where the lack of planning has led us today to being in a situation where we could have done a better job had we done a little better planning earlier on. Sometimes we don't think about it in our earlier years because we're consuming and we have to have stuff, and we pay the price later by not taking those things into consideration. So be very, very careful and be diligent and accurate in your planning. Then number 8 is to be honest in all your dealings. This is so incredibly important. Being honest no matter if it costs you or not. In Proverbs 2:20 and 21, it says, thus you will walk in the ways of the good and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright, people who are honest and righteous, will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. God really is calling us to be righteous, guys. And what does that mean in a practical sense? It means that when somebody gives you too much change in the market, you don't look at it as a gift from God. You look at it as a test for you to go back and say, you know what? This was not right. You need to have this back. It could be something as simple as that, or something as incredibly important as being honest about something that you're going to sell and letting them know what some of the issues may be that are involved. Be honest all the time. Number 9, conquering slothfulness. Very important key to financial freedom. In 2 Thessalonians it says, for even when we were with you, we gave you this rule. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. No worky, no eaty is another way of saying that, okay? And then number 10, listening to the cautions of your spouse and others. Very important you take their information into consideration. The way of fools seems right to them, it says in Proverbs 12:14, but the wise listen to advice. Now, let me conclude by talking just briefly about the whole idea of husband and wife and where it comes to issues in a family environment. The big argument, whose money is it? You know, the idea that, no, this is my money, this is your money. I got to tell you something, guys. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but it should be our money. It's not mine and yours, because think of the implications of that in your relationship. The Bible says, as we've begun, is that we leave and cleave. We become one together. It is not my money, it is our money. And when it comes to important life decisions about how to spend your money, here's a word of caution. Never move out ahead of your wife. If your wife is not on the same page with you in terms of a major expenditure, then you just give that to God and say, Lord, if this is of you, you need to convince my wife that this is going to be okay. We need to be of one mind and really intent on being together. Okay, it's very, very important idea. Life implication. Living in financial freedom is the secret to overcoming the enemy's plan to destroy me and our family. That is very important for us to understand. So, life application, discussion. Realize true prosperity only comes from God. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate yourself in these areas? Realizing true prosperity comes from God, rejecting false financial concepts, giving tithes and offerings, keeping out of debt, learning to abound and suffer need, having sales resistance, diligent and accurate planning, being honest in your dealings, conquering slothfulness, and finally, listening to the cautions of your spouse. In those areas, how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5? And again, not just with the men in your group, but I also, in these last few sessions, these are important discussion questions I would encourage you to take home and discuss. For those of you who are married, discuss them with your spouse. I think you could have some very interesting conversations and evaluate how you're doing in these areas, and then make a plan to get better at all of these things. Great questions. I hope you guys have a wonderful time in your discussion together, and that God blesses you. And until next time, don't forget about it.